Hi, Leroy. What's good, G? What's good? Hi, Rimby and Shabash. Yeah. Hi. What's good? What's good? What's good? Hi, Faye. What's good? What's good? What's good? Hi, Tafara. Oh my goodness, let me find our guest. Let me find our guest. Where's our guest? Our guest is and familiarity. Oh my days. I need to add our guest. Let me add our guest. Let me add our guest. Let me add our guest. Hi, Francisca. Hi, Anesu. What's good? Let's don't know where our guest is. Waiting for our guest. Auntie, what's good? Hi. Okay. Great. Shiazamoku. I see you. Why is this not accepting? Guys, I'm failing to add our guest. Hi, Conrad. You know what? We're kind of having an issue with adding our guest, and I don't know why that is. Oh my gosh, I could cry right now. We're 3 minutes late, guys. Just hang on. Cindy. Oh, there we go. Done. Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I can hear you clearly.
Everyone, can you all hear us? Can everyone hear us? Can you hear us? Please send an emoji if you can hear us. Just any emoji will be fine. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. I don't know if these people... Okay, you can hear us. Okay, perfect. So... Okay, someone's speaking French in the comment section. Okay, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Today we have a chat on a very important issue. With me today is Mr. Chris Abojei. Did I say it right?
Right. Sorry.
Yes. So with me is Mr. Chris Abojei, and we're going to be discussing about mental health and coping techniques. I'm not really well versed in mental health matters, but we have a very professional person here. He's a clinical therapist, so do not worry, this is not some cottage therapist we got from I don't know where. This is someone qualified and has the expertise that we all don't have. So I hope you learned something. Mr. Chris Abojei, would you please introduce yourself?
Okay. I think you introduced me already. My name is Chris. I'm a clinical psychologist, currently practicing in Nigeria. I'm licensed to practice in Nigeria. What else would I say? So I'm passionate about mental health and, of course, mental health advocacy. I spent the last decade in training, in research, and of course, treatment of mental health related cases. I started my career in substance rehabilitation, but I've moved beyond that. And so at the moment, I work on a specialized program called the Employee Assistance Program, majorly for organizations and of course, young adults as well. So I try to help them build resilience and of course, maintain optimal mental health.
Right. So you guys heard that 10 years of experience is right here with us. How I wish we could just take it seriously. And just to repeat it again, this is a registered clinical therapist. Yes? Therapist? Psychologist?
Psychologist.
Yes.
But yes, I'm also a
What's the
psychotherapist.
difference?
So yes, you could merge both of them together. So there's a clinical psychologist and then there's the psychotherapist. So clinical therapist, it works. It
Okay, so
works.
are they the same person? Is a clinical therapist a clinical psychologist, or are they different?
No, they're actually different. So I am actually a clinical psychologist,
Okay.
but I've gotten training in psychotherapeutic approaches. So I'm also a psychotherapist. Yeah. So you can actually be a psychotherapist without being a clinical psychologist.
Okay. I think
Yeah.
that's the thing, because most of us, when we hear, oh, I'm going to see a therapist, we think, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, this person is going crazy. Like, this person is going nuts. They have lost it. They have lost it.
Yeah.
They need mental health. So if you could please just clear up the difference for us, like when you are mentally challenged, do you go to the same person we go to when you say, oh, I'm going for therapy? Is it the same person, or do two completely different things?
Well, the same person actually, the same person. But I think that the problem is that the culture that we live in, culture generally everywhere, we wait until there's a breakdown or there's a significant distress before you seek help, right? If that was not the case, then I could wake up and say, you know what, I have a decision to make. Let me talk to a therapist to help me make that decision. Or, you know what, I just don't feel good. So you don't have to break down. You don't have to experience a significant distress before you talk to a therapist. But again, because of the stigma associated with mental health, not many people really, accept the concept of, of seeking help. And so many people wait until they get to that delicate point before asking for help. And that's why it looks like, oh, when you talk about the therapist, people are thinking, oh, I don't have a problem, or do I have a problem? But it shouldn't be, actually.
Okay. So let's say I break up with my boyfriend today and I am going through heartbreak and I can't eat, I can't breathe, I feel tightness in my chest, everything.
Yeah.
Like, I can't. Is this reason enough for me to go see a therapist, or should I wait until they literally call all my relatives to say this child is dying? Like, at which point,
No.
just for the balance, at which point should I go and start looking for a therapist? Like, soon after it happens and I realize I am losing it, or do I wait until I'm starting to run mad?
Yeah, so that's reason enough to speak to a therapist. It's a significant reason to speak to a therapist. In fact, you find out that reasons to speak to a therapist are, very common and not even as, serious as that, breaking up. You don't have to break up. It could be you, in your career, there's a transition you need to make, and you need to be sure if you're making the right, decisions or the right steps. You can talk to a therapist for that as well. So you don't necessarily have to wait until you break down.
Right. I'll note that question down. I'll just take down the questions as they come in, and then after we're done, I'll just raise them again. Okay. So the reason why I asked if we could have a therapist or a psychologist to come here and talk to us is because I've realized that in our generation, especially, there's a lot of wounds from when we were growing up. Like, so many things happened as we grew up, be it sexual abuse or verbal abuse or just trauma at school. So many things happen in places of work and school, and we just seem to numb these things, and then we grow up and then we are these difficult people to live with and work with and just relate with. So I guess we also need to understand that, like, when I am saying myself as I'm tired, I feel too tired to go to school today, is it that I'm being lazy, or is that genuinely I need a break, like I need to slow down? So if you could just start with helping us understand what mental health actually is. Like, what is it?
Okay, so yes, I think I'll just start from there, and then maybe we'll get to understand the question better. So mental health, I would try to define it first from the WHO's definition, which I think is very common and universal. And so the WHO defines mental health as the state of well-being where a person is able to actualize their potential, right? And so and I always say that it's your ability to be the best that you can be. But they go on to say it's also your ability to cope with normal stresses of life. So, your ability to cope with normal stress, your ability to be productive, to be fruitful, and to contribute meaningfully to your community. So your family, your school, your work, your ability to contribute, that is a function of your mental health. So when you look at these dimensions or this definition, you get to realize that everything we do, we need mental health. And so we all have mental health. I personally like to break it down, to make it a little bit simpler. And I look at it from what I call the three components of mental health, which is your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors. So that's simply what mental health is. It's, the level of functioning of my thought, of my thinking. How productive is that? How productive are my thoughts? How productive is, or how rational is my emotion? And then, of course, your behaviors as well. How rational are your behaviors? And that's generally what mental health talks about, those three things. And the reason why I like to look at it from this perspective is that it helps everybody to understand that it's a conversation we should all be having. I think, I feel, I act. That's mental health, right?
Yeah.
I also understand that many people confuse mental health with mental illness. And that's where when we talk about mental health, many people are actually thinking about mental illness, And that's why before now, when you say to people, if you say to someone, you have mental health, they'll probably tell you, I reject it. God forbid. I don't have
I
mental
reject
health.
it in the name of Jesus. You don't pray enough. Go and pray. You don't trust God. That's it.
I don't have a mental health. But the truth is, there are two broad dimensions of mental health. So you have the mental well-being, and then you have the mental illness, right? So the mental well-being is your satisfaction with life, right? So it's your level of satisfaction with life, your level of satisfaction with your health, satisfaction with your job, satisfaction with everything, where you are at the moment. And that would include your self-esteem, your purpose, your emotional intelligence, your relationships, all that, your satisfaction with every aspect of your life is your mental well-being. On the other hand, when we then talk about the mental illness, we're talking about, an abnormality, or most times I always say that there's a problem with functioning in the three areas, the three components I mentioned earlier: the thoughts, the emotions, and the behaviors. So when you find out that, yes, there's a problem with any of those three areas that seems to affect your functioning, now we might, again, underline the word might, because it's still not a certainty, we might be talking about a mental illness. So what then would bring us to say, oh, this is actually a clear-cut mental illness? I will always say to people that, what is the level of distress that you're experiencing? That's significant, and of course, are other people experiencing distress from your behaviors or from your thoughts or from your emotions? How much does it affect your functioning? And of course, the duration, how long have you been experiencing this? So when you gave the example of a heartbreak, for example, that might not be a mental illness, of course, especially because the emotions that you're feeling at that point are actually normal, right? They are normal. They are, and unfortunately, many people don't understand that they are actually intended to help you heal from that experience, right? So it's normal that you feel that way. In fact, if you had a heartbreak and you didn't feel that way, then I would be thinking there's a problem. There's a problem. Exactly. So duration really matters. So a person who feels sad for 2-3 days doesn't necessarily have a mental illness. You have to look at the duration, and all mental illness have specified durations for diagnosis. Take, for example, depression. An average period before you can say a person has depression, depending on the type of depression, because there are different types of depression, is 6 months. So the person has to have extreme low mood or sadness. You want to look at feeling of worthlessness, hopelessness, irregular appetites, irregular sleep pattern, loss of interest in things they used to love doing before, fatigue, and a couple of other symptoms, risky behavior, getting angry, emotional outbursts. Now, when you look at these behaviors for a period of 6 months, then you can say, oh, you know what, this person is clinically depressed. However, there are some cases where this person has these symptoms and also has suicidal thoughts. Now, a person who has the symptoms and then has suicidal thoughts, you don't want to wait for 6 months. You want to look at 2 weeks before you then say, you know what, this person has major depression. So just like this, every illness, every mental illness has a period of diagnosis. So if you are feeling anxious for a day, you don't have an anxiety disorder. You're probably you're just anxious. If you're sad for 2 days, you don't have depression. You're just sad. You're just sad. And so we need to understand these things. Because many times it's the lack of understanding that makes us begin to freak out. And I would explain something to us later. Let me say this, that the brain doesn't work with reality. The brain works with perception. And I would explain that later.
I've heard that before, and I'm like, yeah, it just didn't make sense. I feel like, thank you for clarifying the duration thing, because I feel like, especially with me, let me use myself as an example. Like, if I'm sad for 2 days in a row, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm getting depressed. I don't want to be depressed. I reject it. I realize, like, after that, like, I'm actually scared of getting sad. Like, at times I get so scared to feel my feelings, and I think also that in the long run it comes up again. Like, I didn't deal with it back there because I was trying to mask it up and say, oh no, I'm not depressed. So I think the duration effect, like, that really does go a long way. I think also in our generation, because we tend to think, if you don't sleep well for a week, if you don't eat well for a week, if you're busy for a week, oh my gosh, I'm so depressed. And we make it so light, so much that when you're actually seriously clinically depressed, you think like your whole world is spiraling out of control. So thank you for that one. Please continue.
Okay, great. So I think I like the fact that you talked about emotions and not wanting to feel certain emotions and not being able to process it. And something that I like that you said was that it still comes back, right? The emotions still come back because you didn't deal with it. And this, for many people, this is actually what then eventually leads to mental illness, because they keep on trying to suppress this, trying to, and they're not coping well. And so one thing that I need us to understand is that there are no good or bad emotions, right? And so it's important that we learn how to accept, process, and work with our emotions. Accept, process, and work with your emotions. Why? Because emotions are designed for your survival, right? And this might sound funny to many people. In fact, a lot of people want to be happy, So if I ask somebody, what do you want to be? I want to be happy. I want to be loved, right? And if I were to say to you, well, I understand you want to be happy. I understand you want to be loved. But you know what? I think you should be sad too. You're probably going to say, this guy's crazy. Why is he saying that? I reject it, exactly. But what you don't understand is that sadness, anxiety, anger, shame, guilt are all emotions that fulfill a purpose for us. Just like happiness, just like love, just like excitement, just like all the pleasurable emotions that we feel. So the difference between all these emotions is that some of them are pleasurable and some others are not pleasurable. So simply put, they don't feel good. So it's similar to somebody who is taking sugar, right? Sugar tastes good. Medications, some medications don't taste good. Take, for example, your paracetamol, anti-malaria. Those things don't taste good. And so some people don't like them, but if you're not feeling good, if you're ill, you have to take them because they fulfill a purpose, right? They fulfill a purpose. And that's the same thing with emotions. Some of them don't taste good. They don't feel good, but they still serve a purpose. And I think that our ability to understand what purpose our emotions serve would not only help us improve our emotional intelligence, but also help us build mental resilience over time, right? Because you're able to understand that I feel sad. It doesn't mean that my world is coming to an end. It doesn't mean that, everything is hopeless. Because sadness is an emotion that tells you of a disappointment. It tells you of a setback. It tells you of a problem. So they are all messengers that tell you there's a problem. You need to fix it. And so the reason why you said earlier that, I try to just push it aside and it still comes back, is because when the emotion came the first time, you did not respond to it, right? And so as long as you don't respond to the emotion, it's still just going to keep on. It's like a messenger. It doesn't deliver the message. It doesn't keep on hanging around. But when you take out time and say to yourself, okay, you know what? Why am I sad? Oh, I didn't get the job. That's why I'm sad. Okay, what do I do about it? Okay, maybe I should do A, B, C. The moment you're able to come up with a solution, you start to feel good. You feel better. And suddenly the sadness disappears because it has served its purpose, right? And so it's important for us to understand. Now, the other thing that I need to mention, again, because, so why do some emotions feel good and some don't feel good? It's because of the chemicals that are secreted when we feel the emotions. Typically, with happiness, you know, the brain secretes a certain chemicals. One of them, serotonin, it's a feel-good chemical. So you feel good, right? And of course, when that secretion is reduced, you don't feel good and you're sad. We need to understand that it's not because I'm losing my mind. It's not because I'm going crazy. It's just because my brain is secreting some chemicals or reducing the secretion of some other chemicals. Now, there is a purpose for that. So take, for example, I said someone did not get the job. So he applied for a job, did not get the job, but he leaves there feeling happy and excited. Wow, I didn't get the job. Do you get it?
Yeah.
So it's not possible. It's not, well, it's possible. Some people do that. In fact, there's in some mental illnesses, we see things like that. There is the affect and the emotion and the mood do not align. You know, someone should be sad, but they're happy and they say they're sad. So we know there's a problem. You know, exactly. We know there's a problem. But the reason why you feel that way, you're not feeling happy, is because you cannot, the pleasurable emotion at that point cannot help you solve that problem. Because if you feel pleasurable, like happiness, what that emotion does for you is that happiness tells you that things are going well. It tells you satisfaction. And it tells you to keep on doing what you're doing, right? And so if I, you know, interviewed for a job and did not get the job, but I leave there feeling happy, what my mind tells me is that you did a great thing. Keep on doing it. And so I'm likely going to keep on using the same approach and not getting the jobs, but still keep on doing the same thing, not advancing in my career, but don't even know there's a problem. So I feel sad as a way of drawing my attention to the fact that this did not go the way you planned it. You need to look at your strategy and do something about it. Do you get it? At the moment I'm able to do something about it, I feel better. I feel good. And so every emotion serves a purpose. Take, for example, anxiety. Anxiety is an emotion that tells you of risk. Right? It tells you that there's a threat. You know, I always say that there's a potential risk because, again, back to the statement I made earlier, that the brain doesn't work with reality, it works with perception. So the fact that you feel a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that that's the fact, right? So you need to be able to probe it and find out is this the fact. So I could feel anxious because my brain perceives threats, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a real threat. But how do I know this? I need to engage my emotions. I need to ask myself that question. What is the threat? You know, is this a real threat? Oh, yes, it's a real threat. And then takes me to the next thing, which is for every time you feel anxious, and of course the anxiety is triggered by a real threat, the goal there is to prepare you, right? So it's like the anxiety voice is a voice that whispers in your ears and says, be careful. It says, be cautious. It says, plan. But many of us freak out when we feel that emotion, right? And this is what we do. There's something we call the anxiety circle. So a person feels anxious and they start to avoid that thing or that trigger. Permit me to use that word. Not the best description, but the trigger. They start to avoid that particular thing that made them feel anxious. And they feel good. They feel a bit of relief, right? But the anxiety circle says that no, over time, the anxiety begins to grow. So you're avoiding it, but it's actually growing. And so over time, that can then lead to an anxiety disorder. Because, again, like I said earlier, that your body, there are chemical secretions every time you feel certain emotion. Now, these chemical secretions are not intended to last for a long time, right? Forgive the biological jargons here, right? So it's not saying that, you know,
let's go for it. Let's go for it.
Okay, great. So your body secretes certain chemicals, but are intended for a short period of time, help you feel the emotion, help you solve the problem. So you know, oh, I feel this way. This is why I feel this way. I need to deal with this. You deal with it, and that's it, right? But when you begin to feel this thing for a long time, it means your body keeps on secreting this chemical over a long period of time. That could then begin to hurt you, right? That begins to hurt you, and that's what we need to be conscious about, right? That's what we need to be conscious about. We need to be conscious of the fact that when we feel a certain emotion, we're not going, oh, I'm losing my mind. We're saying, oh, I feel this. Why do I feel this? What message are you trying to tell me? How can I use this, right? If you're able to do that over time, you'll find that your emotions become less threatening and they become your friends. They become less threatening. They become your friends because they help you grow. They help you, solve problems. They help you do a lot of things, right? And you're no longer as freaked out as you would be with the emotions.
Yeah, because, like when you're talking about this anxiety thing, I felt like you're talking to me directly because at times, especially when it comes to change, and when a relative or a friend asks me what my next plan is and I don't know the plan, I tell them I don't want to get anxious. Can you stop bothering me? And then I shut down. I just don't want to talk about it anymore. And I just kind of run away. And I feel like this is the same case for a lot of people. Like, we have conversations that we don't want to have because we feel the moment we start this conversation, it's going to trigger me, and we just avoid it. And for some unknown reason, and like, I think that's the problem with like Instagram, with Instagram psychology in a way, because it's different when you speak to a person who's actually professionally trained to deal with these things and understand, because Instagram psychology says avoid your triggers, like stay away from your triggers. But then we also then hear later on like, no, you're supposed to deal with your emotions as they come in and process that. So I think also as you were speaking, I appreciated the fact that God is so creative. Like, emotions are like a diagnosis test, like a diagnostic test to say, oh, there's something wrong here. And they're not like your enemies, they're actually your friends. We just need to learn how to work with them. We're learning a lot. Please continue.
So talking about learning to work with them, right? I think I needed to point something out, which is understanding yourself, right? Yes, I don't have a problem with someone saying to me that I don't want to talk about something because I don't feel comfortable at that time, right? I don't have a problem with that, right? You understand yourself. But what I would say to you is that create time to still process it. Don't bury it. So if I want to have a conversation with you, and I do this a lot in therapy, where you bring up a conversation and the client says, I don't want to talk about this, right? As a therapist, you say, oh, you must talk about this, you must process this. You won't say that because you understand that person understands themselves. But we then hope that at some point in therapy, they come to the point where they feel, I'm ready now. And so you must understand yourself so that even if someone brings up a conversation, you don't want to talk about it at that time because you don't feel like you are ready. You don't feel like you have the energy to do that. It's fine. But you then need to go back and say to yourself, okay, you know what? Let me deal with this, right? Why do I feel anxious about topics like this, right? And then you start to process it yourself, because if you don't, then you're doing what I said earlier, the circle thing. You feel good, but then next time, because that same challenge will still keep on coming up. You will still have to have conversations like that. So yes, you escaped A, you escaped B, you escaped C, and then, you still meet somebody else. So it still comes back. And so you need to find time at your own convenience, or what I'll call your strengths periods, where you feel like, you know what, I'm refreshed enough to deal with this. And so have that conversation. Do not push it aside, right? Do not push it aside. But understanding that, I think the first place to start is understanding that your emotions are not there to ruin you, right? They're not there to hurt you. They're actually there to help you grow. They're actually there to help you solve problems. I think when we begin to think from this perspective, it makes it easier for us to deal with our emotions. And you'll find out how much growth you would experience just by being able to deal with your emotions, right? Because your emotions point you to a lot of things. Take, for example, relationships. Many people would not get into toxic relationships if they listen to their emotions.
That is so true, but we don't get that.
Or if they knew how to listen to their emotions, they wouldn't get into toxic relationships, or they would know when to leave toxic relationships.
But we don't listen. I think also with that, I don't know how or if this at all just plays into mental health issues, but at times I feel like there's this perception, like this overly invested perception in, not perception, but this state of mind. I don't even know what words to use anymore, because I feel like you're psychoanalyzing black or something.
so,
But
so,
anyway,
so, I think,
like
I think
I
you should
feel
be
like
as
at times
open
we
as
get,
possible. Yeah, go on.
like I feel like at times
Yeah.
we get to this point where we, in a very disorderly way. I understand we need to think about what other people think about us. We need to at least worry about how other people perceive us to some degree. But I feel like at some point it becomes too much. Like, we're so worried. This relationship is toxic. It is bad. But then I'm worried. But if people see me taking posts down, what would they say? If people don't see us hang out together anymore, what would they say? So, like, is there a way that this kind of plays into our mental health at all? Like, this over, you get my point. This over investment in what people will say. Is that something we need to be worried about?
Well, yes, and there are different explanations for this. I have a model. Well, I've adopted a model for me, which I think is the model for flourishing, mentally. And this model highlights or identifies three things, three areas that you need to pay attention to, and you need to pay attention to positively to flourish. It identifies your experiences, your interpretation of your experiences. It identifies your connections, people in your life, right? People that you connect with. And then it identifies your activities, right? And hopefully I'll talk about that as we go on. But you also find that as humans, I believe, again, this is my own research and theory, and of course I try to study this, that evolution has created a need for acceptance in us, right, as people. And it's a love need. I believe from my experience and research that the emotion love probably evolved from that need of acceptance. When you go back to the Stone Age and the Stone Ages and those periods when people lived together as clans and you had to survive together, if you did something wrong, you probably would be exiled from the community. And that meant that you wouldn't be able to survive, because in Africa here, they probably send you to the evil forest or send you somewhere where the lions and all that will eat you up. And so you don't want to do that. And so we have been programmed to do whatever it's possible to be accepted, right? Now, the good thing is that we've evolved past that era where we are no longer 100% dependent on people, right? Yes, we still have need for relationships and all that, and that's awesome. But I think for many people, the mentality of people's perception still ranks higher than their own perception of themselves. I think that the solution for us, or the remedy, is to reverse that hierarchy, right? Now, the way people perceive you is great, is important, because it helps you. It's also a form of motivation, right? A lot of people would not be hustling so much to get, if
there was no Instagram to show us to
exactly,
it's true.
But at some point that becomes toxic. So I think, and that the first place to start, the first place to start from is, how do you perceive yourself? And then I would like everyone to be able to rank that higher than how people perceive them. Now, even though, in practice, I don't believe in the concept called self-esteem. I don't believe in that concept. I don't think it's real. I don't think it's logical. But I always will say to people that, let's take, for example, that self-esteem is a logical, credible concept. You'll find out that it says self-esteem, not people esteem, right? And so your self-esteem has nothing to do with people. It has more to do with you. It has more to do with the narrative of yourself that you create, right? And so, great. It's nice that we have people liking us, wanting to be with us, and all that. Great. It's part of our evolutionary need. But I think that what is most important is, how do you see yourself?
Mm.
Why?
I think
Because
that's true.
yes, because you'll find a lot of people who have biased opinion about you, right?
Mm.
And if you pay too much attention about that, you're going to ruin yourself.
Mm.
Ah, great. So great. So there is something called the cognitive triad, right?
I think
Forgive
I
me.
did that in psychology in first year or something like that.
Exactly, cognitive triad. Now, it talks about it explains well the cause of depression, and it says that depression is usually triggered or caused by a negative perception of three things, right?
Mm-hmm.
A negative perception of self, a negative perception of others, and a negative perception of the future, right? But I would believe that so simply put, when you have a negative perception of any of these three things, it's likely going to affect you negatively, and of course over time lead to depression. But of these three, the most important is actually your perception of self,
Mm.
because your perception of self determines your perception of others many times. Of course, can trigger that, and of course can also trigger your perception of the future. If already I'm thinking of myself and I'm saying I'm not good,
I'm terrible. I
I'm
can't
terrible,
succeed. I
I
can't.
can't be loved. I can't be loved. And then you walk up to me and say, "Oh, Chris, I love you." I'm going to say,
Mm.
wait a minute.
I'm
What's the
unlovable.
catch? What's the catch? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to break my heart? What are you trying to do? So I say that because first it started with my own perception of myself, and then I'm extending that to the perception of other people and saying, and then I project that, if I'm not good enough, then people are not good. They're only there to hurt me. And then I could also then project that to my future and say to myself that if I'm not capable, how do I even get the future that I want? And so the future is hopeless because I can't get it. And so you see how these things go around. And this brings me to that statement I made earlier, which is that the brain doesn't work with reality. The brain works with perception, right? Because in a case like this individual, and I've seen this a lot in working with people. I've seen somebody who's doing fantastic work, right? Fantastic work. Everybody looks up to them and say, man, I want to be like this guy. But this person has a negative perception of themselves, right? And they can't see what people are saying. So reality says you're badass. Your perception says, no, I'm inadequate. I expect that if the brain works with reality, the brain would ignore that and say, oh, well, I don't care what you think. You're badass, and that's what matters. No, because the brain works with perception. And so the brain says, okay, you think you're inadequate? Great. That's what I'm going to work with. Why? Because there is something called the mind-brain relationship. Now, the mind-brain relationship says that your mind is not an organ. Your mind is just an abstract representation of the activities of your brain. So, simply put, all your experiences, yes, in English, all your experiences over time are stored up in a box called the mind, right? So, trauma, like you mentioned earlier, trauma, your love for food, the kind of food you like, the kind of people that you're attracted to, all those are experiences and they are stored up in your mind. Now, that then begins to determine subsequent experiences, right? I gave an example of using the word love. So a person says, I love you, now to two people, and they respond differently. One of them says, oh, great, I'm happy, he loves me, The other one says, okay, what are you trying to do, right? Because both of them have two different experiences. And of course, that's stored up in the mind. And so every experience you get goes through the mind first, right? Gets an interpretation from the mind, right? And then sends that interpretation to the brain. Now, regardless of what the reality is. So the brain doesn't care about the reality. The brain cares about the finished product, which is the interpretation. So the brain takes that interpretation and then reacts to the interpretation. So if I felt that my world was coming to an end, I'm ruined, I'm just going to lose my mind. That's my interpretation, right? And it's actually not a feeling, it's actually a thought, it's a thinking. My brain takes that and prepares me to respond accordingly. How does it do it? So it begins to secrete chemicals, right? So if I feel anxious because there's an interpretation that tells me that there's a risk somewhere, my brain doesn't say, oh, but wait a minute, where's the risk? It doesn't say that, oh, wow, there's a risk, great, no problem. And it goes, secretes the chemicals that prepare you for that risk. So your typical stress hormones like your adrenaline, cortisol, these are chemicals that are secreted at that point. And what they do is they improve your body metabolism. So your heart is probably beating faster. You're probably feeling uncomfortable. Some people, exactly. Some people even begin to feel nauseous. Some other people feel, a lot of things are happening in your body at that point that causes you distress. And some other parts of your body are also affected, like your sleep is affected at that point. You find that also that you're beginning to think a lot because there's a lot of nutrient and oxygen supply to your brain. So your brain is working faster and more than it would have normally done. Now, this is distressing to that person. And so when the person then says to themselves, I don't feel good, that becomes a confirmation that something is wrong with me. I'm losing my mind. But they don't understand that, no, that's not a confirmation. The problem here is your interpretation. It's not about how you feel. It's about how did you process that information.
I like that because like when you speak about interpretation and like reactions, I think when I was about 20 or 21, there was this one boy I was dating. This boy, he never posted me. He never posted a single picture of me. So deep down in my head and my little girl's head, there was this perception of, oh my gosh, I should be ugly, or there's something that is so terrible about me that everyone else should not know. And even long after that relationship, it's only after I had a spiritual director and he was just taking me back to that place to just say, the way your brain perceived it and then like the way you perceived the situation and made a conclusion that something is wrong with you, it's affecting the way you're living your life now. So this whole thing about I just wish we could just slow down in life and just notice that, like when something happens and we perceive it in like a negative light, and if we don't heal from it, it's going to like continuously affect how we do things in future. Thank you very much. Thank you. We are learning. Someone else in the comment section when I said this is rich, I agree. We could be paying lots of money to hear this information, but thanks be to God, we're not paying. We're just here to take it all in. So please continue. Please continue.
Okay, great. So I think for me the question is then where do we start from, right? What do we do? what do we do? I think that the first place to start is getting information, knowing, right? Which is what we're doing right now, trying to educate ourselves. Because just like we explained earlier, a lot of the problems that we think we have actually started from a faulty perception, right? A faulty perception of something. And there are scholars who believe that, scholars of the Andrenian school of thought believe that we are not, our illnesses, mental illnesses are not the result of genetics, environment, all the things that we think they are. They, of course, criticisms around this, but they believe simply that our mental illnesses are from a place of perception and our thoughts about how we can cope with situations. And so for me, the most important thing is, regardless of what your situation is, start from a place of getting knowledge about it, right? Or simply put, normalize the experience, right? Normalize the experience. So before you freak out, right, understand that this could be a normal experience. So let me find out more about it. And this is actually where, talking to a therapist then comes in handy. But I always say to people that you also need to understand that, therapy should not be about, when you're ill or when you have a breakdown, because we are all therapists to a degree, right? To a degree. A lot of us have dealt with difficult situations, have dealt with traumatic experiences. A lot of us have helped ourselves through dark periods. That is some badass therapeutic experience,
That's true.
Do you get it? So we all have that experience. We all have that therapy experience. Now, and so you've been doing this, but at some point you feel like I need something extra. And so you need to be able to create a circle of support for yourself. Such that when you get exactly when you get to that point where you feel, you know what, I've been trying to deal with this, but it looks like I need something else. I need resources. Then you can talk to somebody. Now, for me, I always say there's a criteria to talking to somebody. You must make sure that the person you're talking to is somebody who can offer you support. The person you're talking to is somebody who is confidential and it's not a chatterbox, so that you're done talking and the next time you're on CNN and like, what? That's me on CNN. But that's a joke, right? But you want to make sure that whoever you're talking to can be confidential about whatever you discuss with them, can offer you support, and is non-judgmental, right? It's non-judgmental. Now, sometimes you don't necessarily need the person to give you a solution. You just need the person to listen. And so you need somebody who is not going to be so judgmental that they're in a hurry to tell you something rather than just listen to you, right? I think if you have these three things, support, confidence, and being non-judgmental, you can talk to that person. Now, a therapist comes in because a therapist is like, you don't have to bug your brain. That's what you pay them for. You pay them to offer you support. You pay them to do that, But if you have a support system, if you have somebody who you feel like can talk to this person can point, then yeah, great, do that.
My go-to person just joined in, actually. Her name is Vicky Roo. She's also into like mental health and cognitive stuff. So whenever I have an issue, she's my go-to person. I'm like, please help me. I need you to listen.
Great. We all need people like that. We all need people like that, so that we're able to talk to them. We're able to deal with our concerns by just speaking to them. I think for me, the other thing that we need to do is, again, in line with normalizing your experiences, is being able to process them, right? Being able to process it. Always take our time to say, why am I feeling this? And so, again, if you've gotten the knowledge, if you've gotten the information, when you feel a certain way, before you start to freak out, you're able to process that information and figure out what is happening. But I always will say to people that it's important that we process our experiences from a rational or positive perspective, right? Rational or positive perspective. And again, the reason why I use that is because not all positive perspectives are rational, right? They're not all rational.
Please explain that part, because we don't understand.
So for example, since we've been talking about dating and relationships, so take for example, there's this hot guy in your neighborhood, right? And every time you walk past the guy, he greets you, says hi, and you then say, oh, because I want to have a positive thought. He's saying hi because he loves me. Right? So
this is true. Oh my gosh, people in the comment section, this one is for you.
So you're actually interpreting it positively, but it's not rational. It could just be a nice guy. It could just be a nice guy. And so he's just saying hi because he's a nice guy. He's just a polite guy. He's that's courtesy. It doesn't mean he loves you, but then you feel good every time you walk by. Hey, he loves me, and you have all those butterflies. And
his mom is your in-law already. In-law.
Exactly. So now you're planning your wedding already. You're choosing your wedding dress, and you're having all and
the flower arrangements.
It feels good until the day you then realize that he's getting married the next week.
He cheated on me and he broke my heart. How could you do that to me?
So again, that is an example of something that is positive but not rational. Right? Okay. Rational is just you being able to consider the evidence, right? It's you being able to say, what is the evidence? And of course, you've been able to process the information with evidence rather than just jumping into conclusion or having some magical thinking about the experience, right? So we need to be able to do that. We need to be able to rationally process our experiences. I also think that a lot of us need to be able to review our past experiences, right? And not from a place of judgment, or regret, which is what a lot of people do, right? A lot of people review the past from a place of regrets. And so they beat themselves up a lot. They are critical on themselves. They're saying to themselves, why did this happen? And all that. But what you find out is that if you do that, that doesn't serve you any good, because your past experiences cannot be changed. They can only be reinterpreted, not changed. Past experiences cannot be changed. They can only be reinterpreted. And so I would say to people that every one of us have had one trauma or the other. Everyone, and I'm not saying an exception. Now, yes, the degree of trauma that I need to experience to have a PTSD, for example, differs from somebody else. So yes, I might be living my life. It might look like I'm great, I'm doing well, but I still have my past experiences haunting me, because those past experiences shape the way I now process things, the way I now see things. And so that's why when I talked about someone saying to you, I love you, and I've had experiences like that where people come to therapy, and then you see that certain things that shouldn't cause distress actually causes distress to them. And you're wondering that why. And then when you look back at the experience, their past experience, you can then see the why. There's a trauma there, and there's a misinterpretation. Now, psychologists believe that many of our past experiences, or traumatic experiences, occur many times during childhood. Childhood experiences.
Very true.
So, parents said something to you. Something happened, between siblings. All those things, they shape a mindset. They shape a cognition, a cognitive process. I was speaking to a couple yesterday, and they were sharing experiences with their kids. 2 kids. One of them is great with academics. The perfect child, right? And the other one seems not to be the perfect child. It's the one that scatters everything. And they were complaining about her. And when I saw the both of them, I said to them, no, this young child doesn't have a problem, right? This person only feels that she has to live up to a certain expectation. And the expectation is the expectation set by our elder sibling, right? So she's trying to live up to that expectation. And I said to them, listen to what she says. Always about, I want to be the best. I want to be the star. I want to be better than everyone. And I say that this is because there is something within your family, your family dynamics, that makes her feel like she's not doing enough. And so every time it looks like she's scattering everything, like, is a way of trying to get attention from you. Now, this was strange to them until I started showing them the behavior. So it was almost like an experiment. Look at this. And they're, oh, wow, now we understand. Because I then explained to them that, hold on, you notice that if you don't give this person an attention when she's throwing tantrums or doing all those things, she does her things well, and they shared examples of when we ignore her, she goes ahead and does the work and does it well. And that's a sign that all she's doing at those points is to gain your attention. I said, why can't she just do it right and gain our attention? No, she can't do it right and gain your attention because you're giving your attention to praising our sibling.
The other one.
And so the only way she can get or she feels she can get the attention is by doing all those other things. And then now, but the truth is, it's not a conscious process. It's not like she sat down and said, I need to get my parents' attention. I must do this. No, so this is unconscious. But the trick there, or the danger there, is that if that is not corrected, she's likely going to grow up that way. And that forms a cognition, so that she relates with the world that way. And so when you see that kind of person becoming a rebel, in quotes, in future, you're wondering that, why is she doing that? Why is she always, because for her, that is what she has been conditioned to think, that this is the only way I can get people's attention. So if she's in a relationship, she's the kind of person she'll be the kind of person who would always want to quarrel with her partner.
Hey, this is the way for someone. Oh my gosh.
Do you get? And the partner is confused. Is wondering that, but what did I do? Why are we doing this again?
Yeah.
But he or she doesn't know that, oh, well, this is the only way that this person thinks they can get attention.
I definitely agree, because even some time ago, I think it's just how beautiful that, you know, science and faith just merge together. Because I've heard what you're saying in the circles of faith, not necessarily sitting across a therapist, but I've heard it in the circles of faith to say, you know, there's a reason why you do things the way you do. There's a reason why you seriously hate goodbyes. There's a reason why you love it when people shower you with confidence. There's a reason why you are the way you are. There's a reason why you do everything you do. So whenever something happens and you get really sad, don't think about like, why does this person do this? But think about it as, you know, like, what happened in my past? What has like, when something happens, sit with it. I think just to bring faith into this, let the Holy Spirit show you where, you know, like, where is this coming from? Because not everyone gets the chance to sit with a therapist every day. But, you know, like, we have the Holy Spirit to be like, oh, Holy Spirit, help me. Not everything I reject. Holy Spirit is trying to tell you something. I said, I reject. Until when we reject, like, thank you. Please continue.
Yeah, I like that, right? And of course, because we understand that not everybody is faith inclined and all that, I always say to people that, you know, many of the theories, many of the concepts that we use in therapy can actually be found in many religious beliefs, right? Many of them, you know. And I don't want to shake tables right now, but I can start to draw. Because so I'm somebody who is very keen, you know, on research. So I've tried to do that, you know, and I've seen that many of the concepts that we talk about in therapy, you can find it in many religious beliefs. And oh, well, this is it here, this is it here, and so we make sense of it. But I think that one other thing that is key, and this is from the Christian religion, it talks about. I think that's Romans, the book of Romans 12. It says that be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Now, that is therapy. That is saying to you that the way that you get transformed is to do therapy on your mind, you know, and all that. And so when you identify how your previous experiences have shaped the way you think, I think this is the point where you then begin to deliberately, and that word is important, deliberately unlearn and then learn new responses. Many of us think that it will just happen. It will just change, you know. We will just wake up. And even when we talk about, the Christians talk about the Holy Spirit, the Holy Spirit doesn't magically change you. The Holy Spirit takes you through new experiences to then shape you. And so you can do that if you understand that, oh, hold on, I need to unlearn this. But not from a place of many people look at themselves. Oh, so there are different perceptions. Some people say to themselves, "This is the way I am." You either take it or leave it. Yeah, exactly. That is a wrong perception, right? That's totally wrong. Now, some people would say, "You know what? This is the way I am, and I am ruined. I am messed up." That is also a wrong perception, right? Because both of them will not enable you to grow. So if you're saying to yourself, this is the way I am, you take it or leave it, you're not going to grow. 5 years later, 10 years later, you're remaining the same. And I think, again, this might not be true, because again, I've had some religious people tell me otherwise, but I think that the main purpose of man, right, is to grow. Is to become a being close to the supreme being, if not the same, right? I'm trying to be careful before people tell me blasphemy. But the truth is, yeah, that's the goal. The goal of being here is to take us somewhere, to get us somewhere where you are beyond that average human being. It's a growth journey. It's not magical. It's not something that would happen. It's a growth journey. And this growth journey is regardless of your experiences, your previous experiences. Because a lot of us cannot manage or could not have prevented some of the experiences that we had. We couldn't have. But regardless of that, it is still your responsibility to grow. So I wouldn't say that because I had a traumatic child experience, you know what, I'm just going to remain this way.
I'm going to be
No,
abusive towards everyone because, I mean,
exactly.
they were abusive towards me.
Exactly. Now, many people actually do this, but they are not even conscious of what they are doing. They don't know that they're doing that because they feel angry that they had to go through that experience, and they feel like other people need to feel the same pain that they felt. But they don't know this.
Angry at the
And so
world.
what I think that we need to understand is that our journey is growth. And so everything I do, my question should be, how can I grow? How can I be better? Now, the moment you begin to think from this perspective, then you are able to learn. Then you're able to unlearn. So that if somebody were to point your attention to something, your goal will be, you know what? First, is this true? If the answer is yes, I think this is true, then the next thing is, what can I do about it? So do I ask for help? Do I go get resources? Do I enroll to a school? What can I do about it? Because that's it. And when we are at this point, then we understand that whatever our base personality or our base experience is, we can always learn and unlearn. Take, for example, and that's what, so in therapy sessions, right? The first few sessions where the therapist is doing an assessment, is trying to help you, gain insight and some other things. Subsequent sessions, especially if you're using a CBT, a model, it's called the CBT model, cognitive behavioral therapy, the bulk of the sessions would focus on skills, right? Will focus on skills. So your therapist identifies the areas that you lack some skills or you need to learn something. And the bulk of what you then do in therapy is to learn those things. So if, as part of the assessment, therapists realize, oh, there's a communication problem here, then that's a skill you need to learn in therapy. If the therapist identifies, oh, I think there's a problem with managing stress, then that is something you need to learn. If there's a problem with conflict resolution, managing conflicts, then that's a skill you need to learn. And so this is the mindset that I think that we also should take to our lives. Is the mindset of whatever gap I notice, I can learn it. And so my goal is to figure out how best to learn it. How best to learn it.
This live has been very informative, and I know we're always getting to the end of it, but you just mentioned something just now about like learning things, and before we start heading towards the end, I just really wish to ask, you know how people have premarital counseling and some people say they don't want to have it. Do you, in your expert's opinion or in your experience as a therapist, would you say it's essential for a couple that's about to get married to at least go through a few sessions with someone who might help them process their past, like their childhood? Because I have heard and I know that, because actually growing up also now I'm realizing I can't believe someone one day will look at me and call me mom, because I've got like all my brokenness and all my wounds, and what happens if they come to me and I haven't healed from most of my wounds and I'm just putting all of it onto them? So if people are getting married, if people are planning to get married, do you think they should, as a couple, go through a few therapy sessions with each other?
Yeah, I think so, right? I think so. I say to people that premarital counseling is significant to the success of the marriage experience. So it's very significant. Also because so many times when people reach out to me for premarital counseling, they are actually trying to do something, which is they say to me, I want you to assess if we are compatible, right?
Hey!
And that is the mindset that many people take to premarital counseling. When you are so again, there is the religious-based premarital counseling, and there's you going to a therapist for premarital counseling. So when they go to the religious centers, it's more about an obligation. It's required, so let's just do it, right? If they come to a therapist, it's more about, are we compatible? And I will always say to people, I will always say to my clients, and I say to them that I'm not going to tell you if you're compatible, right? Even though, yes, my assessments, personality assessments, for example, would give us a clue, would tell us if these are personalities that are compatible. But I've also seen that is nonsense, right? It's nonsense. because the goal is not to tell you if you're compatible. The goal is to help you understand your partner and also inform you of the level of work that you both have to do. Exactly. So 3 things that I think are, very important is that you yourself must be on a growth journey and take responsibility for your growth. So I'm not getting into a relationship and expecting that all my problems will go away the moment I get married. That's nonsense. Right? That's nonsense. Because then when I get married and realize that my problems are still there, then I have a problem with him or with her. Like, I'm like, there's a problem with you. So the first thing is you understanding that it's your responsibility. And then understanding that, secondly, that your partner can offer you support, right? But again, it is your responsibility to accept that support, or your willingness to accept the support, and then vice versa. So you can offer support to your partner, but they can decide if they want to or not. And that's why I then believe that a key aspect that you need to take note of in choosing a partner, it should be somebody who can offer you support and somebody who can accept your support as well. And then somebody who is growing, who is constantly growing. So you can see that this person is putting in a lot to grow. It's putting in a lot to so you're not going to be concerned or too concerned about this person having a personality or a behavioral concern, because you understand that he's growing. So if at any point he identifies it, or I identify it, he's going to be willing to do something about it. The problems that we have is we have people who come together and are not comfortable in having conversations about their inadequacies or their insecurities. And so when a spouse then begins to tread on such waters, there's going to be a problem. There's going to be a problem. But that shouldn't be. It should be, well, you know what? Yes, I don't feel good that you're mentioning this. It doesn't feel
good. But it has to be mentioned, and I have to take it.
So I'm honest enough to tell you that I'm offended. I don't feel good. It's not pleasurable, but I'm going to do something about it.
Your food does not taste good. You take it. You learn how to cook. Your food tastes better. Growth has happened.
Simple. That's it. You're able to come back and say, you know what? And so having conversations like this, I believe that the biggest problem in marriage is actually, or in relationships, is expectations. Expectations not met. Now, communication and all the other things then come in, but it's majorly expectations not met.
So should people go into relationships without expectations from a psychological point of view? Because I feel like expectations are just, they're natural in a way, in a sense. If you go to a restaurant and you see a picture of the food, you kind of have an expectation like, okay, the food is going to come looking like this. And then when the cup of food comes and you're like, what's this? Because, your expectation came from the picture that you saw. So I feel like in the first few days before you actually start dating someone, in the early days, you kind of have a certain expectation subconsciously of what you're going to get into because of the way they've been acting and treating you and all that. So are we saying expectations? Because I believe in virtue, like just the balance, not too much, not too little. So is expectation something we're just supposed to try and avoid when we get into relationships and marriage from a psychological point?
No. I think it's something that should actually be dealt with, right? I always say to people that I don't care what your expectations are. Just make sure that whoever you're with can meet those expectations. That's what I care about. Right? Of course. It's important that your expectations are rational enough, right? You're not trying to build white elephant projects and all that. Your expectations are rational enough. But I think the most important thing is that your partner is able to deliver on those expectations. I think that's the most important thing.
So should expectations be voiced? Like, is that something?
Yes, I think they should be. We should have conversations about our expectations, right? We should have, conversations about it. It's important because, so there, it could be verbal. It also could be non-verbal, right? There are some expectations that are obvious. You just observe them. You know, you can see it already. You can see, so for example, let's say, you know, you want to get married to a guy who is very hardworking. That's part of your expectation. You can already see that. You can see the level of work that he's putting in already. That is clear. You can see this.
So his
And so a
expectations
part of
that you're not lazy.
exactly, expectations that you're not lazy. You can see that. But there are some expectations that are not so obvious. And so you need to have conversations about that. Maybe something as, you know, how many kids do you want? Do you even want to have a kid? You know,
5,
you know.
7, 10.
And I always say to people that even expectations about where the relationship is heading to, right? Are we just dating? Are we just having fun? Is this going to lead to marriage? Now, sometimes it's clear, you know, so if your partner is always talking about it, you know what, at this point, I think I want to get married, you know, that is something that is clear. Some people don't talk about things like that. And so at some point, you want to say, you know what, guy, hold on. What are we doing? Where are we going to? You know, you want to have conversations like that. So I think that expectations should be discussed and prepared for. Discussed and prepared for, you know, very importantly. Yeah.
Thank you very much for gracing us with your presence. Just to ask if you have, you know, any last, because I feel like a lot of people will come back to this live after and watch the playback, because there was so much that you said and it can't just be processed in one sitting. So is there anything else that you feel we need to know, just like on a superficial level? I think we need to have you back sometime again, because there's a lot that you said. Is there something that you feel like for today we just need to hold fast to? Like, what is it that you've mentioned that even if we forget every other thing, 3 things we just ought not to forget? Like, forget everything else, but just don't forget this.
Okay. I think number 1 would be that your mental health is your responsibility. First thing, right? I think it's a truth that we all should accept and take, that it's your responsibility and you need to pay attention to it, right? Pay attention to it. So the same way you prepare for jobs, same way you prepare for your school, you prepare for that same way you should be mindful about your mental health, because you can't do any other thing without it, right? Every aspect of your life depends on your mental health. So we should be deliberate about that, number 1. Number 2 for me is that we should be comfortable with asking for help, right? Be comfortable with asking for help. It's not a sign of weakness. Now, again, I always say to people that, do you know the amount of courage that you need to gather to ask someone for help? That tells you that it's not for the weak. It's for the strong. So if you ever thought about asking for help, that tells you that you're a strong person. So yes, you know, ask for help. And then the third one would be that mental health and physical health, you know, the body, I always say to people that your body keeps scores and your body always speaks. We just fail to listen. So whether it's your emotions, whether it's your physical body, they all tell you something. They all keep scores of your experiences. And I think that there are a few things that we need to pay attention to. Say, number 1, your diet. You need to pay attention to what you eat, you know, what you eat, how you eat, you know, things like that, you know, because people say that you are what you eat. It's important that you pay attention to your diet. We talk about exercise. Exercise is important. It's not overrated.
That's true.
A lot of the things that you feel, right, are the result of chemical secretion in your body. Exercise actually helps you secrete chemicals, and over time can help you build mental resilience. And maybe talking about mental resilience, we cannot promise anyone that they would have a life filled with roses, right? But what we always say to you, that your goal is never to break down or never to fall, but that when you fall, you are able to get up. And so the lifestyle practices that you put in place will help you get up every time you fall. It will help you get up every time you fall. And I'm not saying if you fall, I'm saying when you fall. So because it's certain that you would have days that you wake up and you don't feel like doing anything. You don't feel like your life is going the way you want it to go. it's not a sign that you're ruined. It's just a sign that you need to reassess something. You need to get help, and you need to do something about yourself. So, exercise is important. I would also say create time for activities that make you feel good. Right? Hanging out with friends. You know, you need to know yourself, and you need to know what works for you. So broadly, there are two broad category of personalities: introverts and extroverts. Now, again, of course, we can break them down into others, but I say to people that the introverts get energized by alone time, right? And they need to be aware of this and accept this. So it means that if an introvert is stressed, the way they get refreshed is by spending time with themselves. But many introverts feel that it's a problem because when they look around and they see extroverts are PRs, public relation people. They can make noise and make you think that their personality is the best, you know, and yours is not good. And so when introverts look at them, they feel bad, like, oh, I'm not, you know, but you need to accept yourself and say, you know what, this is how I refresh myself. The same thing, extroverts also should understand that they refresh themselves by hanging out with people, by going out, by making noise and doing all those things that they do. And so you can almost tell that you can tell that there's a bit of bias here. But it's important that you understand yourself, such that when you feel tired, when you feel stressed, it's not a sign that you're losing your mind. It's just a call to you need to get refreshed. And so you need to have your list of activities that enables you to get refreshed. So maybe going to a spa, going for a massage, hanging out with friends, you know, doing your pedicure, your manicure, you know, getting yourself, taking yourself shopping, or getting yourself ice cream.
Yes, reach out there,
whatever works for you, you need to be able to identify that this works for me and then do it. So, you know, for me, for example, poetry works for me, you know, so write a poem and I feel good. So you need to know that this is what works for you and do it, right?
Well,
do it.
So relaxed and so calm. I could never. I could never.
So again, I think that you need to know what works for you, activities that work for you, and go all out, engage them as a way of protecting and, you know, maintaining your mental health. Sleep is important as well. Create time to sleep.
Oh my goodness! Everything comes back. He was talking about sleep. If you just got here and you missed it. Hello? Oh gosh. We have a bit of a technical issue. Are you back? Hello? Oh my goodness. I think we have a bit of a technical issue. Mr. Chris Abojei seems to have experienced a technical issue, I think. Hello? Oh no, we can't hear you anymore. I hope you all learned something from Mr. Chris Abojei, and it was really great having him here. If you missed the whole thing, please feel free to go and listen, and yeah, it was so lovely having him. I will try and save this now. Thank you so much for tuning in. May God continue to bless you. Extroverts, let's go make noise. Introverts, go and do quiet things. Okay. Let's see. He's back, I think. Okay. You were saying something about sleep and then cut off. Yeah. So I just said bye to these people. So maybe you could just finish off and say bye to these people.
Yeah, it's been a lovely conversation with us, and I think like I was saying, that just understand yourself, pay attention to your sleep, pay attention to yourself, be intentional about your mental health, and of course, don't be afraid to ask for help if you need to. Yes. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I hope we can have a follow-up sometime soon, and get into something
No
deeper,
problem.
talk childhood wounds, because that's a serious thing. So hopefully we get to secure you sometime soon. Thank you very much for coming.
No problem. Thank you for having me. Take care.
Bye. Let me save this. How do I save this thing?